Here's the reading of page 410 to 417. Okay, Diocletian's Great Persecution. By the 3rd century AD, Rome was in turmoil. The empire by now was enormous, and it had become increasingly difficult for even the most capable of emperors to govern. As the rule of law broke down, the capital itself was often in chaos. During one 16-year period between AD 244 and 260, 16 men claimed the title of emperor, and none of them died a natural death. Enemies on the borders of the empire were constantly launching attacks. In the north, a Germanic people known as the Goths invaded Roman territory many times. In the east, the Persians overran Mesopotamia and Syria. Threats also sprang from Africa, Gaul, and Spain. During these difficult times, Christians once again became targets of persecution in the Roman Empire. Fearful and suspicious Romans wondered, why won't these Christians worship the gods of Rome? Why won't they bow down before the emperor? What place does this foreign cult have in Rome itself, the very heart of the empire? In AD 284, a Roman general named Diocletian became emperor. Diocletian took the reins of power firmly in hand. He set about restoring peace to Rome and setting up a new form of government. His efforts to establish order succeeded, but at a terrible cost to the Christians of Rome. As a general, Diocletian was used to having his orders obeyed, quickly and unquestioningly. He also believed in the unity of the Roman state. In AD 302, he ordered all soldiers and administrators to sacrifice to Rome's traditional gods, and he expected it to happen. By this time, Christians were a large minority in Rome, and they refused to follow. And we're going to come back and read this. They refused to follow the command. All right, so Faith Underground Catacombs. Beneath the city of Rome is a network of underground passages and rooms known as the catacombs. Early Christians used the catacombs as burial places and occasionally as hideaways. Among the most famous catacombs are those carved by 3rd and 4th century Christians in the soft rock. Here they buried their dead and held funerals. The Christians decorated some of the corridors with the symbols of the young religion. Scratched on a wall, a dove with an olive branch stood for the peace and happiness of the soul. An anchor represented hope. And most common of all, the fish stood for Christ. The Greek word for fish was made of the initial letters of Jesus' name and title, Jesus Christ, Son of God and Savior. In the catacombs, Christian artists also produced wonderful wall frescoes, which they created by painting on wet plaster. Often they depicted scenes from biblical accounts of when God had delivered his servants from times of trouble. Noah surviving the flood, Moses leading the children of Israel through the wilderness, David going forth to meet Goliath, Daniel in the lion's den. The art reflected the Christians' faith that God would save them from their trials. The narrow, winding tunnels of the catacombs made good places to hide during times of persecution or invasions. The Christians sometimes used them for hideaways, though not as places of worship. And there's a picture of that. All right, so back to Diocletian. Emperor Diocletian was on a collision course with the Christians. Between AD 303 and 305, a terrible persecution followed. Roman soldiers began seizing Christian property, burning scripture, and arresting and executing Christian leaders. They burned an entire town in which everyone professed to be Christian, killing all the inhabitants. In other places, they horribly tortured believers before putting them to death. The killing and torture of Christians during this time came to be known as the Great Persecution. But the killing of believers did not stamp out Christianity. In fact, it had the opposite effect. Most people were drawn to the faith because of the bravery Christians showed in the face of death. Christians seemed to grow in strength and in numbers. Ultimately, imperial Rome would prove weaker than those who were prepared to die for their faith. A martyr is someone who dies for the sake of his or her beliefs. According to tradition, one martyr who provided a powerful example of bravery in times of persecution was a Christian priest and physician named Valentine. There are many legends about the man known to history as Saint Valentine. Historians believe that around AD 269, the Emperor Claudius ordered the death of this Christian priest and Roman citizen. Here is one of the legends of the man for whom Valentine's Day is named. And then there's a picture to take a look at as well. It's a depiction of the slaughter of Christians in catacombs. All right, the legend of Saint Valentine. The pretty dark-haired girl lifted the lid of the clay pot and brought her nose close to the opening. She sniffed once, cautiously, and then again more deeply. She smiled. "Nettles," she said, "to ease the pain of childbirth." Valentine turned from the table where he had been crushing dried leaves into a powder. He peered into the pot. "Right again." The physician shook his head in wonder. "How in the world do you do it?" Carefully the girl replaced the clay lid. "I may be blind, but my other senses are as sharp as anyone's, maybe sharper. Father says it is the justice of the gods." Justice. Gazing into the sightless eyes, Valentine felt a tear well up in his own. What justice would rob a child of sight from her day of birth? Bianca had never traced the free flight of a bird across the sky, never stared at a beautiful statue, never seen the love on her own father's face. Valentine scanned his shelves, the neat rows of bowls and bottles filled with herbs he'd worked so hard to gather. He sighed deeply. Not one of his salves or tinctures would do anything to make Bianca see. As if reading his thoughts, she said, "Some day I'll be a healer like you, and then I will find a way to cure blindness." Of course you will." But Valentine did not believe his own words. Such a cure did not belong to human powers. It would take a miracle. Every night he knew Bianca and her father prayed for this very miracle. Sometimes they prayed to one guide, sometimes another, some from great Jupiter down to their family's own household gods. Valentine prayed for Bianca too, but Valentine did not pray to the Roman gods, for Valentine was not just a physician, he was also a Christian priest. Other Romans didn't understand the Christians. How could this little group say their God was the only God? What people didn't understand, they didn't like, and often their dislike turned into something stronger. Many Christians in Rome had been taken off to jail, tortured, and even killed. "Valentine," the girl's voice brought him back. "Test me again." The doctor looked around the room, searching for a medicine Bianca wouldn't know. Then he saw a bowl of flowers on the windowsill, bright flames of orange gold. He had picked them just this morning. He held the bowl up to her nose and watched her inhale the faint, delicate fragrance. Her face lit up with pleasure. "Crocuses! The first flowers of the year!" A light knock at the door interrupted them. "A patient needing treatment?" Valentine hurried to answer. Before he could reach the door, the tapping stopped. Then a moment later, it began again, a little louder. The code! Valentine paused, alarmed. Who would come to his door in broad daylight, using the code meant for their private gathering of prayer? One of his fellow Christians must be in serious trouble. He pulled open the door. A tall, broad-shouldered figure filled the doorway for an instant, then quickly ducked inside. Marius! Valentine embraced his guest. What brings you here? Are you hurt? The young man slumped into a chair. He tapped his chest. Do you have medicine to cure a broken heart? Don't tell me that Livia no longer returns your love, Marius said indignantly. She is as constant as the stars in the sky. Then what has happened? We wish to be married, Marius cried, but since I am a soldier, the emperor will not allow it. Valentine sighed. The Roman Empire had good laws and bad laws, but this was surely one of the worst. Roman soldiers were forbidden to marry. The empire was always in need of troops to defend its borders, and Roman emperors believed that if soldiers had no families, they would be more willing to leave home and fight for Rome. Listen to me, Marius, said Valentine. Tomorrow night you and Livia must come to see me in secret. After all, I am a priest as well as a physician. I will marry you. A soft voice added, and I will help. Startled, the young man leapt to his feet. Who's there? He glanced at Valentine. I thought we were alone. It's my assistant, Bianca. The jailer's blind daughter? Marius peered into the dark corner. Her father works for the emperor. She will betray us. Valentine said softly, she is my friend. I will not betray you, said Bianca. I'll stand watch at your wedding. The young man frowned. How can you stand watch? You can't even see. Nor can you in the dark of night, she replied, but I can hear as well as anyone. I will listen for the footsteps of the soldiers. Late the next night, the young couple arrived. True to her word, Bianca waited outside, a silent figure hidden in the shadows. Casting a nervous glance over his shoulder, Marius gave the secret knock. A moment later, the door cracked open, and a hand drew them inside. A single candle lit the room. Valentine faced the couple. In a voice no more than a whisper, he began the Christian marriage ceremony. Just then, Bianca gave a cry of warning. Quickly, Valentine led them to the back door. Run, he said. The soldiers must not find you here. What about you? Said Marius. I cannot leave Bianca to face them alone. Outside, dark shapes surrounded him, and then the darkness was complete. Valentine woke on a cold stone floor. His bones ached. Above him, sunlight streamed through a tiny window. Outside his cell rested a small, familiar figure. Bianca! He stretched his hand through the bars. You escaped the soldiers. The girl smiled sadly. What could they do to me? I already live in a prison. Did she mean this prison, where their father was the jailer, or the dark prison of her blindness? Either way, Valentine thought her words were true. Your warning saved Marius and Livia. But not you. I am alive, he said. Thanks be to God. Bianca's hands twisted together in her lap. The emperor has said you must give up your strange Christian beliefs. Valentine shook his head. Never. It is impossible. Doctor, you must. Tears welled up in her sightless eyes. If you refuse, you will be executed. The date is set for the 14th of February. February 14th, less than a week away. The days passed. Through the tiny window of his cell, Valentine watched the parade of life go by. Crocuses bloomed, birds billed and cooed, their mature season just begun. Giggling groups of girls sat underneath the trees, writing their names on folded slips of paper for the boys to draw out on the day of the ancient festival of love called Lupercalia. Every day Bianca visited him in his cell. At first she begged him to give up his religion and save his life, but he would not be moved. And we need to pause there, and we'll finish it up in the next one.